The story starts with a girl. She is running for her life, hides inside an old toilet built behind the hill. She had no idea that this would be the very place that would save her, because the demon chasing her loved the scent of humans but couldn't stand the stench of filth. The girl's name was Ansa. Now the question is, why was that demon after the poor girl in the first place? The story begins the previous night. Two students in their hostel were getting ready to sleep when suddenly they heard the sound of heavy footsteps above on the roof. The two looked at each other, and just then the lights went out, plunging the room into pitch darkness. Before they could even understand what was happening, the door creaked open, and two masked people stormed inside. A sharp, slicing sound cut through the air, and in the next moment, both students were dead. Meanwhile, in the girls' hostel, Anissa was fast asleep. Suddenly, she heard someone calling her name, again and again. Half asleep, she opened the door, and standing right in front of her was a terrifying figure with white eyes. It slowly moved toward her, and Anissa froze in fear. The next morning, when Anissa arrived in class, her face looked as if she hadn't seen a nightmare, but a real-life horror. In the meantime, the news of the two boys' deaths reached the school's vice principal. To prevent panic, he decided to hide the incident and had both bodies kept in the prayer room. That night, Anissa, feeling unwell, went to the medical room. She suddenly sensed that someone had entered, but when she turned around, there was no one there. Terrified, she ran outside, and that's when she felt the touch of a cold hand on her back. She turned, and there stood the same demon again. Anissa ran for her life and hid inside that same old toilet. Shivering, she peeked outside and saw one of the teachers, Ustad Bagas, performing some kind of strange ritual in the woods. Meanwhile, another teacher, Ustad Jamir, went to the prayer room and noticed a horrible stench coming from the bodies. He quietly prayed for the dead, unaware that, at that very moment, a dark sorcerer was also inside the school, planning to use those corpses for his evil rituals. That sorcerer wasn't insane. He cut off a lizard's head and let its blood drip onto burning charcoal. Then a blood-soaked effigy was dipped into it. Within seconds, both bodies lying on the ground vanished. Samir panicked and tried to run, but the door was locked. Suddenly, one of the corpses fell from the air right in front of him, and its head was in its own hands. Terrified, Samir stumbled backward and collided with the second corpse. His legs gave out in fear, and he collapsed to the floor. The sorcerer chanted mantras and blew blood over the effigy, causing both corpses to tremble. The next moment, the entire room was flooded with blood. Badly injured, Samir tried to crawl out. As he did, a horrifying scream pierced the silence of the night and echoed throughout the entire school, throwing everyone into panic. Within moments, students rushed to the scene and carried the unconscious Samir to the medical room. Anissa suspected that some dark sorcerer had cursed that teacher, but her friend quickly disagreed, saying, "That's impossible. He's a deeply religious man. No curse could ever affect him." As the two argued, the other teachers arrived and sent all the students outside. That same night, the principal, upon hearing the news, returned to school in anger. He confronted Vice Principal Ridwan and demanded, "Why didn't you bury those two boys' bodies?" Ridwan replied, "If the police find out, the school's reputation will be ruined." The principal was furious and shouted, "Nothing is more important than humanity. Honoring the dead is our greatest duty." But by then, it was too late. Both bodies had mysteriously disappeared. After a moment of silence, the principal decided that the truth would no longer be hidden. That very night, he gathered all the students in one place and began praying with them. But as the prayer continued, the face of the teacher standing in the back, Bagas, turned pale with fear. When everyone followed his gaze, they saw that the principal had vanished, and in his place stood an upright corpse. Chaos erupted throughout the hall. Everyone began to wonder if the principal had also fallen victim to the curse. The entire school was now engulfed in terror. Ridwan announced that all students would sleep in the hall, and the teachers would take turns standing guard. Meanwhile, Satria was convinced that all of this was the work of a human, not a spirit. As night fell, he quietly sneaked into the principal's office with his friend and began rummaging through old papers. That's when he found an old newspaper that said years ago, a tantric and his entire group had been murdered, causing chaos across the city. But Setrio was completely shocked when he saw his own father's name listed among the dead. The next morning, Setrio decided to take leave and go home to find out for himself whether his father was really alive or not. Meanwhile, when Anissa went to the restroom, she saw that same teacher, Bagas, performing some kind of ritual in the forest again. She noticed something strange there, an offering that looked like it was meant for a deity. Thinking it was something unlucky, Anissa's friend picked it up and threw it straight into the trash. But she had no idea that this very act would lead to her death. A while later, as she was hanging her clothes to dry, she felt like someone was standing in front of her. She pulled the curtain aside, but no one was there. She continued her work, but suddenly her eyes began to burn like fire. She screamed in pain, rubbing her eyes furiously. Anissa rushed over, but what she saw would shake anyone to the core. Blood was pouring from her friend's eyes and a long wooden skewer was sticking out of her mouth. The next moment, her friend pulled an iron nail out of her own eye, while still alive. Anissa froze in terror. Her friend stumbled backward in agony and slipped into the well. Anissa grabbed her hand with all her strength, but suddenly 2 pale white hands reached out from below and dragged her friend into the dark depths of the well. Now only Anissa's screams and the eerie silence remained. When Ustad Bagas heard about all this, he stormed over to Ustad Ridwan in anger and shouted, "Now you see! This is the curse we brought upon ourselves." Things had gotten so bad that the school now looked no less than a graveyard. One after another, students were being attacked, and fear had completely taken over everyone's minds. Many teachers wanted the children to be sent home immediately, but Vice Principal Ridwan firmly refused. He said that riots and chaos were spreading outside, and if the students left the school, they'd be in even greater danger. So he suggested that everyone stay inside the school and pray together, hoping that God would protect them from this evil. But fate had something else planned. As soon as the prayer began, a few students' eyes turned completely white. Their faces became horrifying, and they started muttering the same words again and again. "Everyone's dead! Everyone's dead!" Gradually, more and more students began behaving strangely, and the entire hall turned into a madhouse. No one could understand what was happening. That's when a few religious teachers started reciting verses from the Quran aloud, and after a while, the atmosphere calmed down a little. Ridwan then sent Citrio and a few other students to the medical room to bring some medicine. But as soon as they reached there, a teacher lying on a medical bed suddenly sat up and stared at Citrio with a strange, unsettling look. Terrified, Citrio ran out of the room, leaving behind the teacher, who had now started chewing on pieces of broken glass. Anissa noticed that Citrio was now stubbornly insisting on leaving school and going home. She tried to stop him and said, "This is all the work of some dark sorcerer. If you go outside, he'll trap you." But Citrio refused to listen to anyone. He had made up his mind. He had to see his father. To stop him, Anissa even tried to challenge him, but it had no effect. As soon as Citrio stepped out through the school gate, the sight before his eyes was horrifying. Rotting corpses lying on the road, complete silence, and the stench of decay everywhere. But he didn't stop. He kept running. By the time he reached home, it was evening. When he opened the door, he saw his father's lifeless body hanging from the ceiling. Shocked and terrified, Citrio looked outside and saw 2 men dressed in black, brutally killing someone. The moment they noticed Citrio, one of them shouted, "That's the student from that religious school," and they charged toward him. To save himself, Citrio dived into a pile of corpses nearby and pretended to be dead. He lay there for hours before somehow managing to save his life. The next day, when people were collecting the bodies, they mistakenly thought he was dead too and sent him to the hospital. The scene there was even more horrifying. People wrapped in bandages everywhere, screams of the wounded, and the smell of blood filling the air. That's when he realized that the world outside was far more dangerous than school. Meanwhile, Anissa, furious, went straight to Ustad Bagas and demanded, "Tell me, what were you doing in the forest behind the school? You're the one behind all this, aren't you?" Bagas didn't say much. In a cold voice, he simply replied, "Whatever I'm doing is for the good of this school," and walked away. Now Anissa had no doubt left in her mind. She was convinced that Bagas was the dark sorcerer trapping everyone with his curse. On the other hand, Citrio finally reached home. But what he saw shattered his heart. His father, a well-known healer, was now a lifeless body. His mother, sobbing, said, "Your father can't be buried yet. If that dark magician finds out he's dead, he'll use his body for black magic." That night, under the cover of darkness, Citrio buried his father's body behind their house, so no one could find it. Then he asked his mother. He spent his entire life healing people, never hurt anyone. Why did he have to die such a horrible death? Tears filled her eyes as she revealed the truth. Some people were jealous of your father's skills. They conspired with an evil sorcerer and falsely accused him of practicing black magic. The entire village fell into that sorcerer's trap, and no one listened to your father's truth. Eventually, they killed him. Satrio asked his mother to come with him to the school, but she refused. She wanted to stay home to protect his father's soul. That night, Satrio secretly returned to the school. Meanwhile, the school nurse was dressing a teacher's wound when suddenly the lights went out. When Anissa entered the room, she saw the nurse's eyes had turned completely white, and she was manically biting off her own fingers. Then she lunged at Anissa. Anissa quickly began reciting verses from the Quran, and a strange, powerful energy filled the room. The nurse started trembling for a few moments, as if some spirit was fighting inside her. But in the very next moment, she stabbed herself in the head with a pair of scissors. By morning, Anissa sat in shock when suddenly she heard a demonic whisper in her ears. She felt it might be a sign, a clue. So she immediately met with Bagas and planned to search the school principal's office. But just then, Ridwan interrupted, saying it was against the rules. At that moment, Satrio also arrived at the school and decided to fully support Anissa. Together, they broke open the door. A foul smell of rotting flesh came from inside, and in the middle of the room was a dark ritual altar covered with lizards and strange sacrificial objects. But the principal had been missing for several days. So who had done all this? Everyone's eyes turned toward Teacher Bagas, because he had often been seen performing black magic in the forest behind the school. Nervously, Bagas said, "I was just cleaning up the old offerings. I don't even have the only key. Ridwan has one too." But no one believed him. They tied him up in the hall. Just then, Satrio realized something. The real secret might be hidden in Ridwan's room. Screams were coming from inside the house, while Anissa stood outside, anxiously staring at the door. Then she saw the same demon that had been haunting her, standing at the doorway of the nearby room. But in the blink of an eye, it vanished. Terrified, Anissa slowly walked toward that room and peeked through a crack. Inside, someone was performing black magic, and that person was none other than the dark sorcerer himself. Before Anissa could react, he violently pulled her inside. Meanwhile, another student mysteriously collapsed and injured. Now everyone's attention turned again to Teacher Bagas. But he had been tied up in front of everyone since the beginning, proving his innocence. That's when the horrifying truth came out. The real dark sorcerer was none other than Teacher Ridwan. He was hanging against the wall, holding a blood-soaked voodoo doll. As he drove nails into the doll, unbearable pain surged through Anissa's entire body. Those dolls were actually symbols of all the people Ridwan had killed through his dark magic. His ultimate goal was to wipe out every believer, one by one. Just then, the school hall was swallowed by darkness, and the dead students appeared outside like his puppets. A bloodbath was about to begin. Bagas called out to everyone, "Don't be afraid. Keep your faith strong." Together, they all began reciting verses from the Quran. That's when Ridwan, furious and out of control, lunged at Satrio and slapped him. A fierce fight broke out between them. Satrio was younger, but his courage was great. He didn't back down. Instead, he used all his strength and managed to knock Ridwan down. Anissa shouted, "Satrio, break that clay pot." That's the source of his power. Without wasting a second, Satrio smashed the pot, and as soon as it broke, the dark magic vanished like smoke. All the puppets fell to the ground, and Anissa was finally freed. Supporting each other, they stepped out of the room and locked the door behind them. But suddenly, a massive ball of fire fell from the sky and crashed straight into that room. In an instant, the entire room was engulfed in flames, and with Ridwan's screams, everything came to an end. The demonic sorcerer was dead, the curse was lifted, and those who had died finally found peace. With this, the story ends here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Also, subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.